Good morning. The August 18th meeting of the Referrals Committee will come to order. Would you please call the roll? Oh, sorry. Is that okay?
Sure.
I mean, I can do it too. Councilmember Revelle?
Here.
Councilmember Fleming?
Here.
And Mayor Biss is here. We have a quorum and we are ready to do our work. I thought the first thing we should do is report back on the discussions that we plan to have with council members about individual items coming out of last meeting. So I had 3 on my homework list. One was to talk with Councilmember Burns about the local hiring process referral, which is on row 18 of the referral tracker spreadsheet. And he confirmed that he has a, I would say significant and ambitious policy items for consideration regarding not only local hiring goals and mandates for contractors, but also for city staff and with different ideas for different departments. And so he did request that item be referred as opposed to just rolled in with existing conversation.
And that was to the MWEBE committee, or?
Well, that seems...
It sounds pretty broad.
It is broad, but it does seem like that committee
a good place
would
to
be the place to start. And I think they, yes, it might be somewhat broader than their typical day's discussion, which is why he wants it referred, but nonetheless, it's closer to what they do than, we could send it to APW, I suppose, but it seems better to
start there.
Yeah, that seems right to me. The next item on my homework list was row 22, Councilmember Reed's referral regarding water shutoffs. And my assignment was to offer him a few different courses of action. And he said he wanted some time to think about it and has not yet gotten back to me. So I'll keep everyone posted when I hear back from him. And my last assignment was row 26, which is Councilmember Suffredin's referral regarding sewer repair and sidewalk replacement. And he was in fact totally comfortable with rolling that up with the existing discussion that had been ongoing regarding sidewalk replacement. And so I think we should go ahead and refer that one. Councilmember Fleming, I know you had a couple as well.
I did, and I didn't bring my list from last time, but from memory, I was speaking to I did speak to Councilmember Burns about the urban farm going to Parks and Rec, and so he was okay with that. He was a little concerned with it being there too long, so I told him that they were already talking about potential expansion of the garden. So that will go to Parks and Rec at their next meeting, and then we'll just kind of follow along to make sure it doesn't get stalled there, because he does have an outside partner he's already been talking to about this. I believe HWE policy was also one that I spoke to him about. All of those things, as the chair, we had room for them to go in the September HSC meeting, so I would just read those for the public. It's the daily crime bulletin, and the squad room report, services for reentering citizens, and the HWE policy are all set to go in the September HSC meeting. And then for discussion only, so no staff memo, was the decriminalization of drugs. And Councilmember Reed and I had a conversation about that coming in October, but some things got moved around, and so September makes more sense. And so he is simply going to talk to the committee about that to see if there's any interest on moving further on that item. So there'll be no staff time needed for that one.
Okay, and I think the only other one I have was Councilmember Burns' referral on the burying of the ComEd lines.
Yeah, so we did talk about that one. It seemed like there was a little bit of conversation about that going into potential a TIFT. Also that had been kind of, I guess, some years in the conversation between the two wards. And so that one, we talked about going to economic development. He was not sure if that was the right place or if APW was the right place. And so we kind of had a little bit of a standstill. He was going to talk to, I think, Councilperson Braithwaite about what had been done before he got here to see, or if, about what had been done before he got here, but then also we talked about, is that something that would be maybe ARPA funds? And so we were a little bit stuck on where, so I will follow up with him, and I also can follow up with maybe with the city manager's office, because I am not really sure myself where that should go. Happy to take you all suggestions if you have any, but there was not really.
And so which item is that?
It's burying the comment lines that are on Ward 2 and 5. I think they're the lines along the Mayfair train track.
Okay, okay. Yeah.
So it seems like a big project, and I'm just not sure who,
Yeah.
I mean, it involves ComEd and us. and
Right, right.
Whatever. So I will follow up with the city manager's office about that one and Councilmember Burns to see.
Yeah. I mean, that
If
does
he's-
sound like it could be a TIF expenditure.
It could be,
TIF
but we don't.
project, right.
Do we start the conversation with the TIF? Do we start the conversation now to see what it even entails? I'm not quite sure, and I didn't
Yeah.
know the history of it, so.
Yeah, me either.
So I will report back to you guys, maybe an email if that's fine, just once I get somewhere.
Great, thank you. I think that concludes the items that we had agreed to follow up with our colleagues about subsequent to the meeting 2 weeks ago. Does that seem right? Okay.
It does, although I have a question. Obviously, as the chair of HSC, I was able to report back on placement of items. Would the idea be now that you, since you've talked to people, you're now sending the email to the chairs to say, please get this on the agenda?
That would be the idea, and, you know, because, I mean, I think there's so far limited progress in actually getting things on agendas,
Yeah.
so we've got to,
was
that's sort of the next, next step.
Yeah, that was kind of my question, if
Yeah.
we're like having the chairs come back to us to say it's going to be on in November or
Right.
whatever, is probably
Right.
helpful for the committee members. Okay.
Yeah, and, you know, for APW and P&D, there's multiple meetings every month, and,
And would it be appropriate to copy the staff person who staffs that committee, so
yeah, I think that's right.
everybody knows? Mhm.
I think that's right. Great. So I think the next thing we ought to do is we have four new referrals that are,
5.
I think the one that would go to police, we're going to hold for a minute because there was already a conversation about that.
Oh, the confidential informant.
There was a
Okay.
conversation
Yeah,
about that
and-
at
Okay.
yeah, I
one
mean,
of our
as I look
previous
in the spreadsheet, it looks like there's 4 that are still there, and I think one is being held to figure out
Okay.
the
Okay.
appropriate course of action. And so for those following at home, those are lines 29, 30, 32, and 33 of the spreadsheet. And the first, and they're all from Councilmember Reed. The first is a referral to increase councilmember compensation to a living wage. And if anyone wants to jump in with their assessment of that.
Sure, I can start. So I gave that one an overall score of an 11. For time sensitive, I gave it a 2. I want to elaborate for scope. I gave it a 1 because it would be, in my assumption, a council decision. For existing policy, I also gave it a 2. I guess we could relate it to what we already get paid as a policy. For community interest, I gave it a 3. And for goals and priority, I gave it a 3.
Yeah, I give it relatively similar scores. The one thing actually for scope, I had a 1 and I crossed it off and marked a 2 because I realized, you know, we have a compensation committee, we have a process already in place in the code, and so I think this would involve repealing that process, or at least superseding that process, which is a little complicated. Additionally, you know, I was sort of brought up to believe that it was really problematic to change compensation of elected official in the middle of the term. Now, of course, the constitutional problem is with diminishment, not increase, but nonetheless, I think I would just want a little bit of research to be done about that because it's pretty unusual to
Yeah.
change compensation of elected officials in the middle of the term.
Yeah, I didn't think it was legal, but,
Well, it's definitely illegal to decrease it. It may well be legal to increase it. The explicit prohibitions I know about are about decreases. But because it's illegal to decrease, it's not usually talked about because it's sort of, you don't want it to operate as a ratchet necessarily, right? Anyway, I'm not suggesting it's illegal. I'm just suggesting it's
needs research.
it needs research because I don't know, and it's both inconsistent with what our code currently says and also on a broader level potentially.
And then I
thorny.
thought at one of our rules committee meetings, of which there were so many, that we did decide to eliminate the compensation committee, to eliminate the citizen, the committee that had citizens on it.
Well, I don't remember that.
I don't think so. I think we cleaned up something up in a very minor way regarding the dates in that part of the rule.
Okay.
But I don't think we got rid of it. And I
It'd
think
be
that would
good-
have,
It'd be good to go back and check, but
It's a good reason for that to be a 2.
yeah, right, yeah. right.
Because I did think we had sort of no process at this point.
Oh, I didn't think that.
Yeah, okay, it's definitely worth checking that, yeah.
Right.
For whatever it's worth, my recollection is that the rule was written for a particular year. So the date was sort of in the past, and I think we made it general, but definitely
Maybe
worth
check.
looking into. So, I'm sorry, we
Yeah, I interrupted,
launched into
I'm
this.
sorry.
On the contrary, we launched into this without letting you give your assessments.
You didn't finish yours, though, I don't think.
Oh, sorry, so I had a 2 for
Scope.
time sensitivity.
Oh.
No, sorry, a 3 for time sensitivity, a 2 for scope, a 1 for connection to existing policy, a 3 for community interest, and a 3 for alignment with our goals, which adds up to a 12.
So I had a 3 for time sensitivity, a 2 for scope, and a 1 for connection to existing policy, and I gave it a 1 for community interest, but maybe there will be a lot of interest, and then a 2 for goals and priorities. So I gave it a lower number, but I'm happy to go with your higher number there.
What was your total score?
8, I think. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
9.
No, not 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say from experience, not to cast aspersions in the policy goal, but as a matter of community interest, politicians voting to increase their own pay
Right,
tends to get
right.
people interested.
Yeah, yep.
As a matter of being in Evanston. As a matter of being in Evanston, everything is high community. Yeah, but I think this would be high community interest as well. And I'm happy for the scope to be 2. I hadn't thought it through, the Constitution and such.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to, I agree about the potential for community interest.
So just sort of going with majority rules here, we could say 3 for time sensitivity, 2 for scope, 1 for connection to existing policy, 2 for community interest, and 3 for alignment with goals, which I think adds up to 11. Is everyone okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay. And next is the Fair Workweek Ordinance.
So then I gave it 3 for time sensitivity. I gave it a 3 for scope, 2 for policy, also 3 for community interest, although maybe it would be just a 2, and a 2 for goals and priorities, so I gave it a 13.
I gave it a 2 for time sensitivity and a 2 for scope. I mean, because there are, some cities that have done this, and anyway, a 3 for existing policy, a 3 for community interest, because I think the employers will likely be pretty interested in this, and a 1 for goals and priorities, so that, I think 11.
Yeah, so that was very similar. We were all very similar. It was a 2 for time sensitivity, a 3 for scope, 3 for connection to existing policy, 3 for community interest, and 2 for alignment with our goals. And I put a little frowny face next to it to indicate that, I think this is a really interesting example, frankly. We all gave this a high number, which would sort of put it at the back of the line. And to me, the issue here is just, this is a hard project. It's not that it's a bad project. It's not that it's an appropriate project at all. I think in my own policy view, I think it's a great project. And I think it's a super appropriate project. It's just a really, really hard project. And so I just left sort of, I wound up giving it a 13, which Councilmember Fleming did also. And we could just sort of, I think when we give something like this, a number like that, it presents really the council member in question with a fork in the road, right? Which is, the message from us is, hey, if you want to do this, it's going to take a bunch of time. It's going to have to be kind of a main focus, and then And then I think, I don't know if we go back to him and ask, what level of kind of how interested and committed he is to it, and whether it's worth moving forward in light of these high numbers, or if we just leave it as is, or what. But I was struck by the sort of conundrum that number raised.
So is there an alternative approach, which would, rather than referring it, well, maybe it would go to a committee, but then the committee would say, let's have a subcommittee that works on this for a while before it comes to the full committee, or just some way to continue or to begin the conversation, but sort of along the side somehow. I don't know.
Well, I think whatever it is, if this is done seriously, it'll take a lot of somebody's time, right? So if it's a subcommittee, it'll take a subset of the committee's time and a lot of some staff time. And that doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. I think it just means it's a high-stakes decision, right? The decision to move forward with this is a decision to allocate a lot of different people's time, and so the question then is, what triggers our comfort level at making that decision?
Well, one thing we could think about is before we do, right, because 13 means, you're just out there in the ethernet somewhere. We could ask Councilmember Reed, because he did provide the link for Chicago, and I didn't look to see, I looked at it, but I don't know how far they are on it. Maybe, did they? Okay, I'd looked at it to see what it was. So maybe he could bring, I'm thinking of economic development as being a good starting point, but maybe he could bring, or ask someone from the city of Chicago to come to economic development just to talk about it. So that provides some of the context that then our staff don't have to do in terms of a whole long presentation. And then economic development can kind of mull it over and figure out, and then they can turn it up the pipeline. So, I think, like you said, for all the reasons we think it's a good idea, it just needs a lot of time. But if Chicago did just pass it, that seems like an instant place to go for us to at least hear from them how they did it, how it went, how they implemented it, how it's going. And then the economic development, or wherever we send it, could have something to chew on before we then have our staff go into like a long memo about what their thoughts are on it here.
That seems fine to me, and I'm happy to have that conversation with Councilmember Reed.
Yeah, that would just be my suggestion, because he probably, given the breadth of the work that we have to do and the lack of staff we have, I don't want to put it on him to do a whole research project, nor for our staff to start that if we can kind of look at a local expert. But I would be hesitant to start another subcommittee, because we have a lot of those already as well.
Right. Okay. Are you comfortable with that course of action? And I guess we probably ought to write a number irrespective. And again, we're pretty close, so just sort of averaging. It looks like 2 for time sensitivity, 3 for scope. Though you've all convinced me that it should be a 2, because there is a off-the-shelf ordinance just across Howard Street. 3 for connection to our existing policy. Oops, sorry, that's not good. 3 for community interest, and 2 for alignment with our goals, which adds up to 11, I think. No, it sure doesn't. Adds up to 12. Great job, Daniel. 12. Yes, correct. All right, let's move on now to row 32, which is another referral from Councilmember Reed. This is to have the Corporation Council appointed by the City Council.
I gave that a 2 for time sensitivity, just because it had to do with the referendum. 3 for scope, 1 for existing policy, 3 for community interest, and I wasn't really sure where to fall on the goals. I gave it a 1, but I continue to struggle with this because we haven't really set our own goals. So anyway, I gave it a 10.
I gave it a 2 for time sensitivity, a 2 for scope, a 3 for existing policy, a 2 for community interest, and a 3 for goals and priorities for 12.
And I gave it 2 for time sensitivity also, where we all agree. 2 for scope, 2 for connection to existing policy, where we all gave it different scores. 3 for community engagement, which I do think this would raise a lot of eyebrows, and 3 for alignment with our goals. And so so it's the sort of easy ones to average out are 2 for time sensitivity, 2 for scope, and 3 for level of community interest. For connection to existing policy, we have a 1, a 2, and a 3. You know, well, I don't know. I put it as a 2 because it seemed sort of in between. It's not a very coherent explanation.
When I put it as a 1 because our current code is that, you know, the city manager hires the city corporation counsel. And then thinking back to goals and priorities, I guess I would give it a 2 now, thinking a little more about it.
I mean, I guess I didn't see any goal or policy that it was related to.
Well, I looked at it for city code more so than policy.
Yeah, but I guess, and you know, Councilmember Fleming, you make a very fair point that we haven't really articulated goals, but, you know, when we think about what they would be, you know, things about racial equity and housing affordability and climate and sustainability, and, you know, I'm hard pressed to see the direct connection. Obviously,
Yeah, I mean, I
effective
can go with
governance is a
3.
good goal.
Yeah, I mean, I could go with a 3 there. It was, again, I was kind of not, just that one, when I think about the goals and priorities, we haven't really talked about them, so I still struggle with that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have, I guess we'll go with it. Go ahead, Councilmember.
I mean, for number 3, it does relate to an existing policy because we have
Right.
a current way we handle that. So that's one clear thing, but as far as it advancing some city goal or policy, I don't
Yeah.
see it doing that one way or the other, or at least the way we've articulated our goals thus far.
Yeah, I think that's if folks are comfortable, I like that compromise, to have it be a 1 for connection to existing policy and retain the 3 for alignment with city goals, which would turn it into a 2 for time sensitivity, a 2 for scope, a 1 for connection to existing policy, 3 for level of community interest, and 3 for alignment with existing goals, which adds up to 11. Is that all right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then the last one is the Evanston voter initiative process, creating a mechanism for residents to introduce items by referendum that would trigger a council vote.
So this one I gave a 2 for time sensitivity, again, thinking through a referendum and when we have elections. For scope, I was a little bit torn since we already, you know, this has already kind of been out in the public. If we use that, if this is what he's talking about, you know, there's not much for the staff to do. But I wasn't quite comfortable with that either because I haven't read that document in a very long time. And so in order to put things on the referendum, I'm not fully educated on that. So there might be some stuff for our staff to do. So I guess I would be more of a 2 for that one. Existing policy, I would say 3 because we don't have an existing policy about residents doing such. For community interest, I had 3. And for goals and priorities, I also had a 3. And so that puts my at 13, right?
Yep, that's right.
So I vacillated between a 1 or a 2 for time sensitivity. A 3 for scope because I thought, you know, we had a whole legal discussion about whether it was even something that could be on the ballot, or it seemed to me I had a lot of questions about whether it was possible.
It's a great point, but I'll say my recollection as a guy who was just a resident at the time was that the dispute there was about whether it could be initiated by referendum itself,
Okay.
not whether it was a legal thing at
Okay.
all. So my understanding at the time was the view of those who got it knocked off the ballot was, hey, if the council wants to do this, they can, but the residents don't yet have the power to do stuff like that by referendum.
Okay. I gave it a 3 for existing policy, a 3 for community interest, and a 3 for goals and priorities. So, big number.
Yeah, suddenly my 11 looks generous. I gave it also, like everybody else, a 2 for time sensitivity. I went the sort of Councilmember Fleming route. I gave it a 1 for scope, just because I felt like there was this off-the-shelf document, like it or not. At least it's a starting point that's already written out in detail. Though you raise an important point that there are questions to be asked about that. I also gave it a 3 for connection to existing policy, 3 for community interest, and 2 for alignment with our goals. So I think the sort of averaging it out actually would be exactly what Councilmember Fleming gave it, which is very close to what Councilmember Revelle gave it, which is a 2 for time sensitivity, 2 for scope, 3 for connection to existing policy, 3 for community interest, and 3 for alignment with our goals, for a total of 13.
So I know we talked about this before, but didn't really land on a decision. This seems to me, because it was something that people in the community did want before, by giving it 13, it's according to our rules or our kind of process, it would not be something that's a priority. But maybe this is something where we think about using, like if Councilmember Reed can find 3 more people on council or whatever it is, some more support on council to, I don't know, make a subcommittee or kind of work through this, so it's when it does come to us, it's some of those bigger questions are hashed out. Just as an idea, so that it's not kind of just stuck down here with us, but it also isn't straight ahead to a committee, and we just make sure that the council has an appetite for, the several on the council have an appetite for the work that it's going to take to figure out whatever it is.
Right, because ultimately the goal, I assume, is for the council to put it on the ballot as a referendum. I think, is that the okay.
I think that seems very sensible, and I'm happy to add that to my list when I talk to Councilmember Reed. So, excellent. So we have 15 minutes left. My computer's frozen. We have a few things that we want to do. One is we need to figure out if other things should be assigned right now. One is Councilmember Fleming wanted to talk about referrals that come from staff. And one is we need to figure out when our next meeting is, because 2 weeks from tomorrow it looks like it's not going to work. So I would suggest that we begin by figuring out if there's anything else at this time that we want to refer. One thing that I think we clearly want to do is, as a follow-up from the conversation I had with Councilmember Suffredin, is the sewer repair and sidewalk replacement item. I think should go back to APW essentially as soon as possible. Is everyone comfortable with that?
Yes.
Yes.
Is there anything else on this list? I mean, so that we retain the status that we left 2 weeks ago with, where everything with the number 8 or less has been dealt with. There's still, 9s that were referred in June and perhaps even May. So there's still things to get to, but is there anything that folks feel we ought to address before the end of this meeting?
Can I just jump in? So it looks like Erica had listed the ComEd power lines as going to economic development on September 22nd.
Oh, great.
Terrific.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think it would be good if we can start assigning the higher number items so that they're not just lingering here. And I'm happy to have the conversation about staff referrals, at our next meeting but, I think if we can get some things off of this list and assigned, we can let our peers know that they are assigned.
Pardon me. Sounds good. So do folks want to just look at the 9s, for instance? Does that seem?
Yeah, so this is the
reasonable?
first one yours for making Evanston more walkable? That's the first one I have on my list.
Yeah, I mean, I feel very, feel like I'm in the hot seat now. Yeah.
So I would think that would go to P&D, but we have economic development. Either makes sense, I suppose.
Because I think Erica said that it had already been a topic of discussion in economic development. I mean, a while ago maybe, but.
I don't recall that, but maybe so.
I think that's right. And, I went to the Economic Development Committee meeting in July just to talk about ARPA. And man, especially on the part of the resident members, there was a lot of interest in walkability and placemaking and stuff. So I think that's a perfectly sensible spot.
So we can ask Chairman Braithwaite.
When, I believe.
Oh, I'm not on the committee, so is it when?
And do we want to, I mean, I don't see a lot that we're sending to economic development. I mean, I'm comfortable coloring that yellow if we think it should wait, or we can do it green.
No, I think we should do it green. It's been on here for a while. And if it's already been brought up, it should at least be ready for conversation and some staff support.
Okay. So the next item is the condo issue of yours, Councilmember Fleming.
Yeah, and similar to you, I mean, I had already spoken before we started this process to Councilmember Nguyen, who was the chair of Planning and Development, about this. So I'm happy for it to be yellow, assuming we can get it on, maybe November. The condo conversion that was in my ward the condo that was up for conversion in my ward failed the vote by the board, but they definitely are still interested in making sure they are not in that place again. And there is another condo building where there's a developer looking to buy it and make it to apartments again in the ward. So it's time sensitive, at least for those few people, but anyway, so I would say yellow, fingers crossed for October, November.
All right, so I'll communicate that, and we'll keep monitoring it in case there's, if it's not moving fast enough, we'll have to nudge. That brings us to Councilmember Ravel's curbside textile recycling idea, which is slated to go to APW.
I mean, I think it's pretty straightforward. Pretty straightforward to get the research for it, because we have a couple of nearby communities that have already done this with it's kind of, in my view, it's like a collective resource model, so.
And, I mean, APW meets every 2 weeks. Those agendas are sort of, they're long but routine typically.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of automatic stuff. I think I would be comfortable calling this green if you guys think that's appropriate.
Yeah. And green, are we saying, just for the sake of conversation, would that be maybe October would be our thought, if not before?
It certainly doesn't need to be September. I mean,
Okay.
yeah, November even would be fine.
Well, let's then color it yellow, just because there's a lot of green stuff that still hasn't gotten onto agendas. And
okay.
so I think that's a good prompt for me to be a little bit more aggressive in following up with folks and making sure that all this information is translating properly. So that's the end of the 9s. There's no 10s. Do we want to move on to the 11s, or do we want to? How many 11s are there? First of all, there's 1, 2, 3, 4,
Four.
5, 6, 7 11s.
Oh, gosh.
So I would recommend that we hold at this point.
Well, do we have some 11s that have been on there for a while?
We do, that's a fair point. So the 11s at the bottom of the list are all pretty recent.
We have this overlay zone
But yeah, the first.
from May.
Yeah, there's the end public distribution of the Daily Crime Bulletin.
That's
from
already
May.
on the agenda.
Oh, that's on the agenda.
That's on, sorry, so that was one of the ones that's going to be on HSC.
Got it. And do you know when that's going to be?
September.
Great.
So I'll repeat those. So the decriminalization of drugs will be just Councilmember Burns giving us his opinion
Mhm.
and seeing if there's any appetite. The Daily Crime Bulletin is September slated as well. Police are already working on that. As well as In the Squad Room will be September HSC. As well as City Services for Reentering Community Members, which is just a discussion item.
Got it.
And the HSC policy is also slated for September.
Oh, the healthy work environment.
Healthy work environment, yes.
Got it. So do we know what date it is? It's
I think it's the
September
7th.
All
the
right.
Tuesday after Labor Day, yeah.
Actually, I think it's Wednesday.
Well, that would be
I mean,
news to me.
Tuesday is rules.
And I think we're after rules.
Yeah, but early on, I think I wrote down Wednesday.
I think there was a mishap on
Was that
the
a okay.
system that had us listed as Tuesday and Wednesday for at some point. We will clarify the date.
Yeah, we need to check.
As chair, I thought it was Tuesday.
Right, no, that would make sense to do it all on the same night.
Yeah. So I'm sorry I did not communicate those thoroughly. So those are
No,
all
I-
taken care of.
Great. So, okay, great. So that brings us then, as you say, to the overlay zone, which also is, that's a referral that was made on May 24th to P&D. I mean, May 24th is a long time ago.
Yeah, I
There's no
think that
question
should be a
about it.
green.
All right, are you comfortable with that, Councilmember?
I still don't quite understand what it is, but I think it should be green for the sake of time.
Yeah, I can't remember what it really, but anyway, we will find out.
And then, yeah, and that brings us to the local hiring requirement, which was made in late June, so much more recently. That I'm much more comfortable coloring green because it's not as though we're sending other stuff to MWB.
Right, and I think that they had already, per Erica last time, said they already had been talking about some of that. I know when I was there at the last meeting, which was my first meeting, there was an employer on there who actually was talking about, this is why he joined the committee, because he could not find local hires.
Well, again, I think the council member really wants to talk about the city hiring residents.
Oh, is that what it is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But again, it's the only thing that we'd be sending to MWB now or even in the foreseeable future. So I'm comfortable coloring it green. I think giving
Yeah.
them one item is totally responsible. Okay.
And then what about that, did we get the property standards complaint, that was already done?
Where's that?
The property standards complaint process, that was already assigned, correct? It was on 5/15?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that was
All right.
assigned, actually, that was assigned a month ago. So that's a good one to check in about. But that's on my list.
And should we split the list up so that you're not calling everybody? I mean, we could split it by committee,
Sure.
unless you really find a
No,
lot of
I'm-
satisfaction in doing that yourself.
I mean, I think it's very clear from the velocity of the outcome that I don't find satisfaction. I mean, it's 11:10. I will make some gentle and tentative requests by email for folks to do some follow-up, and if that doesn't, if the particular divvying up that I come up with doesn't make sense, then you could just push back and let me know. But I think that'll be quicker than sort of trying to do this in real time here.
Okay. And then my last question, and I know one has to end early. For Council Member Kelly's thing about making the subcommittee, did that happen in P&D? It did, okay. I did not watch. Okay, perfect. Take that off my list.
Great. So then the question becomes, what do we want to do about our next meeting? Because I think 2 weeks from now, each of us has a conflict. Every day that week, each of us has a conflict.
Well, we could even push it off to 3 weeks since we've at least scored everything
Oh,
that we
hey,
have, right?
hey, I lied. My conflict was canceled. I had a trip that was canceled on Monday the 30th. So actually, I'm available on Monday the 30th if we want to schedule the next meeting for that day.
I am also available. I'm just not available on the 31st or the 1st.
So Monday, the 30th is
Okay.
fine. Mhm.
Can we do first thing?
Sure.
Does that work? Great, then I can just
Like
What-
start.
9:30 a.m.?
9:30 is great.
Is that
Okay.
okay? Is there anything else anyone wants to talk about before we adjourn and let Councilmember Fleming make it to our next commitment? So I just wanted to add one more thing, which I should have made this introduction in the beginning, but I think many of you have gotten a chance to meet Allison Leipziger, who's the city's brand new policy coordinator, whose job is really to help with stuff like this. And so, I mean, that thought came to me especially when I was talking about the Fair Work Week, but also perhaps for the voter initiative or other of these more complex items. We now have someone on board who's literally here to help us with this stuff. And so I think that's just kind of useful for all of us to bear in mind as we're encountering items on these lists that are interesting and aligned with what the city wants to accomplish, but just a little much, and we don't have enough bandwidth. Like someone just came on board to help us with that very problem. So I think that'll be really, really helpful. So welcome aboard.
So you talked to Councilmember Reed about the two things that we just mentioned, the voter initiative and the weather. Does it make sense to not only say you can bring someone from Chicago, but maybe ask, why don't you work with Allison? And
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect, that is
Absolutely.
great to know.
Yeah, that's the whole point.
That is the whole point that I was halfway unaware of. So thank you.
Anything else for anybody?
Oh, I do have one question. So since you're here in lieu of the city manager, can you, before our next meeting, provide us with, I guess it comes in the city manager's report, but like an update of the things to come? It's in the city manager's report, right, usually on Fridays? There's some kind of spreadsheet that has like an update of things to come, update of agenda items. We're still struggling a little bit with knowing what the city manager is trying to put on the agenda.
Okay.
And we need to make sure that the council members have fair access to the agenda items.
Are you talking about the agenda items that come out through that Asana list that we send out?
I guess, I don't know if it's Asana or it
Okay.
just looks like a spreadsheet to me, but it comes out in
Okay.
the city manager's report on Fridays.
Yep.
So if we can get that, I mean, obviously we get it on Friday, but I think as a committee, if we can make sure we get it before our meetings, that would be helpful. And then if you can relay to Erica that we would like, or I at least speak for myself, would like to have a better flow of information coming from the city manager's office with upcoming agenda items.
Sure.
So when we're referring things over, the ordinance, I think, was set that we're supposed to, as a committee, be the ones who put everything on the agenda, but we have not gotten there yet. So this might be a good start for us to get there.
Yep, I can do that.
Thank you. And actually, one more thing, Emma, if you don't mind. We talked at the last meeting about having it doesn't need to be complicated at all, but just a quick explanation of what the scoring system is that could be put on the website. Because right now, the tracker is public, but those numbers are just completely meaningless to anybody who doesn't also watch the meetings.
I mean, there is a link to,
But it doesn't
but, should we have that more?
The link only says what the topics are.
Right.
It doesn't have the scoring numbers on it.
Can you send me the scoring list and then I'll update the link that we
I'll
currently
do that,
have
yeah.
and then make sure that they understand.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And with that, with no other business to come before us, the Committee on Referrals stands adjourned.
Thank you.